Welcome to Reach for the Stars and the Words from Astronaut Zoom, presented by Deborah Lee Rose for the CRA on-demand session for the CRA 2022 conference. It's my pleasure today to interview Deborah Lee Rose, and I'm Nancy Rogers-Zagara, editor of the California Reader. Deborah is a well-known, celebrated author and a real friend of California Reading Association. She's been at many of our conferences, and today she's going to talk about one of her new books, which is especially exciting because it's about the International Space Station in celebration of 20 years. And it's very timely because Nicole Mann is the first woman a Native American astronaut that's on the International Space Station. And she comes from my county, Sonoma County, from Petaluma. So this is really timely for teachers to know about this book and to use in their classroom. Deborah's book, Beauty and the Beak, was a Eureka winner, and many of you have probably read that book. Also, Deborah had an article in the California Reader in the fall of 2021. This shows a spread of Astronaut Zoom, and it's one of my favorite pages, R for Astronauts Read, which is this book is also on the newly put together list of from the California Department of Education for the K-2 level. So visit that website also to read more about it. Another one of my favorite books is Scientists Get Dressed. Deborah, you want to tell us a little bit about your friend here in the picture?
This page was part of the inspiration for the book because this is Professor Marion Diamond, who was my friend and my colleague at UC Berkeley. She was a world famous brain scientist, but she deeply believed in the public knowing about what she did, and she was in charge of the Lawrence Hall of Science. So she always brought a brain with her to teach, and we captured that in this. Yeah, so I have a lot of inspiration from people in California, lots.
Yeah, so Deborah is a longtime California author and has many different books. And one of the books that is new to us is Swoop and Soar, and you'll get a handout if you'd like, developed by Lori Oscus, who's also going to be presenting at our conference, Swoop and Soar, How Science Rescued 2 Osprey Orphans and Found Them a New Family in the Wild. So this is an educational resource that teachers can use, as well as the educational guide for Astronaut Zoom and Astronaut Alphabet Book. So please give me a warm welcome. Please listen to Deborah and learn from her. So I'm going to turn it over to Deborah now.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm really looking forward to answering Nancy's questions because I love the give and take with reading teachers. California Reading Association has encouraged me and inspired me. I just want to mention that something amazing is going to happen, though we don't know the date yet. Astronaut Zoom is going to be sent to the International Space Station for Storytime from Space. And it's a great honor, and we'll keep you all posted when we know more. I'm going to turn this a little bit so my lamp's not right in the picture. Okay, good.
Yeah, so we're excited to see that Storytime from Space. And so I want you to start talking a little bit about the book so we know more about it. And your award-winning picture book, Astronaut Zoom, is all about living and working on the International Space Station. How did you come up with this energetic title?
Well, at this moment that we're recording, there are 11 astronauts on the space station, which is a pretty big load. And they are all orbiting the Earth at 17,500 miles per hour. When I first learned that very large number about their speed, I thought, how can I convey such a sense of speed to young kids, I have to find the right word. And the word Zoom, like Zoom, popped into my head. And this was long before we were all Zooming in the pandemic. And that's where it began. And then when I realized that the words astronaut Zoom started with A and Z, I thought, wow, an alphabet book. And I had written an alphabet book a long time before called Into the ABC, and it has been extremely popular. So I decided it was time to do another alphabet book if I could come up with something for every letter. That's always the challenge.
Right. So I'm glad you talked about the structure of the alphabet book. So can you talk a little bit more about why you decided on an alphabet book?
Oh, I'm kind of crazy about alphabet books. I like serious ones. I like funny ones. I love the ingenuity with which different authors approach the alphabet. And there was only one other space alphabet book like this, and it was for much older kids with a lot of much heavier text. And I wanted this to be very zoomy. So you'll see, you can read straight through it in very short text pieces. And then there's a lot of information in the back. So it was structured to move fast, to give kids a sense of, movement.
Yeah, I think the Zoom theme carries throughout. And
We tried.
I think teachers can reinforce that idea when they're reading it to their students.
And I hope they'll all say Zoom when they read it aloud.
They can do hand motions too, right?
And hand motions are good, yeah.
There are a lot of strong verbs in this book, including Zoom and float, and especially read. Why are these action words important? And do you have favorite words in the book?
Often you'll see pictures of astronauts where they're not moving. They seem very stationary because they're doing a particular job or they're posed in a particular way. But in fact, they move all the time. They have many, many tasks throughout the day. When they're spacewalking, they're moving. When they're exercising, they're moving. When they're playing instruments for fun, they're moving. And so in order to convey all this movement, I decided on action verbs. I could have used adjectives, there are a lot of those, but I really wanted it to be very active. And my favorite is actually the hardest one. X is always the hardest letter in every alphabet book. And this is the second time that I've picked a word where the X is in the word. In my ocean alphabet book, I used where blue whales exhale. And it's like a little joke for me. So in this one, it says, wow, they exclaim, because there is this amazing wow factor when they look out the windows and they see Earth. So that's my favorite verb in the whole.
Well, I love knowing about that little detail that that teachers can also tell their students.
Yeah, I think about this stuff a lot. I mean, it's a very short book, but there's so much decision making that goes on behind it.
And it's packed with lots of facts that are fun-filled that kids can really get into quickly.
And the photos have so much story right in them.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the photos and how you got them?
Yeah, so I looked at thousands of photographs. Many photographs of astronauts look kind of gray. There's not a lot of color inside the space station. But if you look really hard at thousands of photos, you begin to discover that any photo that shows the atmosphere and the Earth has beautiful blues in it. And then there were other photos, spacewalk photos always have a lot of white. And if it's taking place when it's dark, you have a lot of contrast. So I wanted them to be very kid-friendly photos, but with a lot of information right in each photo, because I try to write my books for kids on different levels simultaneously so that a kid can start young with a book and continue to grow with that book for at least several years. So any child can start with the photos here and then move to the alphabet letters and the alphabetized words and then the back matter.
Right. In the back matter, could you just show us that for a minute? There's a lot of interesting information. And as you said, there are a lot of access points for different readers.
Yes,
And,
and including an entire spread on how they practice on Earth, because there's no counterpart on Earth. So they have to practice in a pool, and they have to learn how to put on their suits and everything. Their training is a huge part of what they do. So we decided to tuck that into the back. Plus the back has lots of fun suggestions for things that teachers can do. We'll get to that, I think, a little further down the questions. I have some fun props to show you too.
yeah. And so you've written several books about scientists in action. And I'm wondering, in this book, you have 13 women, I believe. And so why do you want to really emphasize the role models of women in science?
Well, I do a lot of reading about science education today, STEM learning, and one of the biggest parts of what's going on now is more representation of women role models. There are many women scientists, but too often they don't get highlighted. But there is an increasing number of women astronauts. In fact, Nicole Mann from Petaluma is going to be in charge of the space station while she's on it. This is very high visibility, but you have to find good pictures. And luckily there are more and more good pictures all the time. So I spent extra time looking for pictures of women. And in Scientists Get Dressed, I have a lot of women scientists too, because that book was actually inspired by my niece, who's a water chemist, and she goes out in waders into ponds. And I saw a picture of her wearing her waders that her daughter showed me. And I said, I didn't even know that's what she did. And I thought, if I don't know, there must be millions of kids who have no idea. So that's what I'm trying to do, is really depict more women.
So I think it's really important for kids to see scientists in action. And I think a lot of your books, or both of those books, really help kids see the everyday things. That's why I like the Scientists Get Dressed, because I bet these are questions that kids always want to ask about what are they doing and how do they get dressed for the space station. When I saw that picture in the newspaper yesterday of Nicole Mann, I was thinking about her spacesuit that she has on. Do you want to comment about any of those?
I do. One of my favorite pictures in the book is the two women who were the first all-women spacewalking team. But instead of showing a picture of them fully suited, we decided to show them partially suited, because there's science to what they wear under the suit. Because it can get so hot out in space, oddly enough, even though it's freezing, when the sun is blasting on them, they have undershirts lined with tubes of cooling water. And I wanted to show part of the process of what they do, because that will raise kids' curiosity. And also, it's a great Halloween outfit. You can buy thermal underwear and put tubes on it, and that is an astronaut in process costume. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that is so exciting. That's a great Halloween idea for someone that
expensive, very doable.
Yeah, and they can think about maybe sometime they'll be on the International Space Station.
When I was a young teen, my science teacher made us put on a play about astronauts, and that's what we wore, thermal underwear, and I never forgot it.
Yeah. All right. Can you show us some of the other things that you have some fun ideas for teachers to use to make it come alive?
Yes, and this is not exhaustive. Teachers can come up with lots more ideas. One of the things that the astronauts do on the space station is all kinds of science investigations. And there's a picture of them even growing plants, because for long trips in space, we're going to need to grow our own food. So for that kind of work, astronauts use lab gloves. And this is the kind I bought in the drugstore. You know, people use it for all kinds of purposes, but it's very thin and it's very pliable. So it can show a kid that they can really move their fingers, and how astronauts can do almost anything. But if an astronaut has to go on a spacewalk and they have their big, thick astronaut gloves, I don't have a white pair, but I have a dark pair of winter gloves, ski gloves. And when you put those on compared to the thin glove, you begin to understand the constraints that astronauts on a spacewalk have and how they have to have different tools that are much thicker that they can grasp. So it gets kids to think about the different things that astronauts have to cope with, the tools that they use, the sensory experience, the kind of practice. And you can have kids try on all kinds of gloves and then see if they can write their name or pick up a tool. And you can find that actually in the guide for Scientists Get Dressed. We have a whole activity about astronauts' gloves, including like gardening gloves and other kinds of gloves. So then another cool thing is astronauts have fun. In fact, they are required to have fun. And one of the things they like to do is pretend they're playing soccer because the ball just floats around. And I found a tiny little squeezable soccer ball like they might use up there. And kids can have fun playing with this. They could play with it in a swimming pool or in a room, but you have to learn that in space, if you kick it too hard, it will ricochet everywhere. So everything astronauts do is the same and different, which is a really important underlying theme to the whole book. Now, what does this have to do with astronauts? This is an exact same toy as went into space on one of the missions to the space station, because they love to have toys that will start floating while they are still strapped in, and it shows them, even though of course their instruments show them, but the toy shows them that they have reached microgravity, and kids get a really big kick out of it. And sometimes the toy is a gift from the astronauts' own kids. So this is a very child-friendly prop that you can use to help kids get a sense of what's up there. I really wanted to bring home to kids something that is so far above their heads that they might not think about it. And also there's a website through NASA where you can get the schedule for when the space station is going overhead and you can see its lights. And a lot of people do that. Or anywhere in the world, you can find out when it's going over you.
Yeah, that would be an exciting thing for kids to do, to go out and watch. I remember going out and watching the Sputnik. Very
And this,
exciting.
they go around the Earth every 90 minutes.
Yeah,
So it's pretty frequent that you might be able to see it.
that's right.
Yeah.
Now just a little bit more about the I like that idea of the comparing and contrasting and finding out what's the same and different. That's a really important concept in language arts to think about. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you could use the book for reading, writing, listening, and speaking?
Yes, I do want to take 1 second to tell you that the reason I know that things are similar and different is because I spent many hours on my back deck with my next door neighbors during the pandemic, and they were little and their preschool was closed. And we imagined what was going on up there and compared it to what we were doing. Like we would sweep the decks and pretend that we were in different parts of the space station, and we would talk about how they were cleaning up there. So that's why cleaning is in the book. But for language development, so in the back of the book, I suggest that a couple things that kids can do, which astronauts do, is to write letters or emails to people on Earth, telling about what their experience is like up there and how they miss them and what they see. And also kids can make a video pretending that they are a scientist on the space station, because nowadays they make videos all the time of what they're doing up there, even something as simple as washing your hair. So you could pretend that you're an astronaut who doesn't have running water, and you could wash your hair in the way they do, which is with just a very small amount and maybe a wet washcloth. And what would it be like to get yourself all clean and dry when you don't have a sink up there? Another funny thing is that in space, you have to brush your teeth with your mouth closed around your toothbrush so that the toothpaste and your saliva doesn't float around. And you could practice that and videotape yourself or each other, pretending to brush your teeth in space. All kinds of things. And there are great videos that you can watch of the real astronauts, and then you can make your own version. I also know a teacher who had her kids do a whole book, their own alphabet, and they especially what they saw on Earth when they would look down. And my favorite idea of all is that there's a part of the space station called the cupola, which is where the big windows are. And you can order online or download pictures that astronauts have taken as they've looked down at Earth. There are thousands. And if you have them printed out and you put them around, then you can get the same sense of what astronauts are seeing. And you can turn that into a reading corner or a hands-on science corner. And my favorite, my silly favorite of all is that they actually have pizza parties on the space station, and they use tortillas because they make less crumbs, and anybody can make a tortilla pizza party, but they just won't float.
Those are great ideas. I love
I had a
them.
lot of fun thinking about that. I wanted them to be easy, doable, and you could essentially do them anywhere.
Mhm. I love the idea of getting the pictures, because I've heard that's one of the most amazing things that the astronauts say is when they look down and see the Earth, that you get a whole different perspective.
They call it the overview effect. They say it changes their life. But those pictures are also used by scientists on Earth. They get information from them. For example, you see an entire hurricane fully formed. You see where the plume of a volcano is traveling. So it helps connect with data that scientists on Earth are collecting. So you could have kids role play the astronaut and the scientist on Earth, and how they are looking at the same thing from different perspectives. Depends on the age of the kids, but so many possibilities.
So I like that idea of looking at perspective, because that's one of the things we want to help kids think critically and to take on different roles and perspective. So
Yeah.
with those pictures, they could really do that easily, and they could take again that role of the astronaut and the NASA person down on Earth, or the scientist or whatever. So
And NASA's website has lots of places you can go to find those.
yeah. Anything else you'd like to talk about critical thinking, or some of the
Yeah, I
tips?
wrote down one or two things. Okay, well, critical thinking, working for Lawrence Hall of Science, critical thinking was such a big thing. But sometimes kids are afraid of the notion of critical thinking. So I really try to bring in a lot of fun into the books and a lot of realism, because once kids get the sense that they are essentially meeting a scientist and they could imagine themselves as a scientist, then I think they can even more easily put on the critical thinking cap. How would I need to think about this if I were doing this real thing? How would I look? What would I wear? How would I put it on? How would I have to decide between two different tools, two different gloves? I'm just trying to make it immediate, very immediate. My son's an actor, and he was always very into role play and costuming, and it made me look at science in a different way, that kids could put that very imaginative way of looking at the world and connect it with science, which can be such a tough call sometimes. So that's my purpose.
Right. And I think all of your books make it so much fun and an easy entry point for kids to get into science. And it's just part of daily life, and you help them just transition right in there. And it really sparks their curiosity and gets them thinking about all those things. So I want to thank you for our conversation today. And do you have a last word?
Yes, swoop and soar. I just want to say that, CRA was so supportive of Beauty and the Beak, and you especially. So when Janie was telling me she really wanted to do a book about ospreys, and you'll laugh when I tell you that my first thought was, oh, I already did an eagle book. Ospreys are completely different than eagles, and whereas Beauty was the story of a bird that could never go back into the wild, but Janie was able to do engineering to help her. This is the story about birds that did go back into the wild, again, because of Janie's deep knowledge of science, but under different circumstances. And this rescue took place after a massive storm some years ago, and considering what's been going on in the country and natural disasters, I think that this is a book of great hope, because these birds did go back into the wild and now they have a wild life. And we really want that to be part of healing. So we see this as both a science and a healing book. And working with Janie again was just, it's like having your own private teacher. And we put all of that into the book, the story, and so many facts.
Yeah, so I think that that book especially is really good for empathy. And as you're saying, with our natural disasters, it's, again, another very timely book to help kids think about what's happening in the world, and then a real positive story that they can think of something, a positive outcome.
It's helped by science.
And it's all helped by science. So again, it just shows the place that science has in our lives, integral part of science, and why we want to learn about it and read about it.
And read about it, especially read about it, you bet.
Especially read. And you have so many wonderful books. I hope participants will go online and look at all your books. And then we're going to have the handouts for you. Go to your program link and
Easy downloads.
Get those downloaded. And then another exciting thing is during the conference, Deborah Lee Rose is has given us some books to give away. So that'll be part of the raffle prizes. So I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. I know I did. And thank you, Deborah, so much for being a strong supporter of CRA and writing those wonderful books. I'm looking forward to the next one. You have another one?
I am sorting out lots of ideas. Sometimes there are so many ideas. I have to decide what great pictures I can find, who I'm going to work with, and what topic I want to live with for at least 2 years.
Okay, well, I'm excited to find out. And thank you again. I can't wait to read your next new book. Thanks again.
Thanks so much for interviewing me.
Okay, take care.
All right, everyone. Bye.